Tom was a quiet man who enjoyed a simple life by the lake. He lived in a small wooden house with a wide porch where he often sat in the mornings, drinking tea and listening to the gentle sound of the water brushing against the shore. The lake was everything to him. It was peaceful, calm, and full of memories from his childhood. His dog, Max, a brown and friendly Labrador, always lay by his side, wagging his tail every time Tom looked at him. One morning, the sun had just begun to rise, painting the water with shades of gold and pink. Tom walked down the narrow path to his old mailbox at the end of the gravel road. He liked mornings like this, fresh, quiet, and full of promise. He opened the mailbox and found a small stack of letters. Most were the usual: a grocery flyer, a bill, and one white envelope stamped with the mark of the Homeowners Association. Tom frowned as he held the envelope. He didn't often get letters from the HOA. Usually, he just received community updates about gardening contests or holiday decorations. But this envelope felt different. He tore it open carefully, unfolded the letter, and began to read. The words were short, formal, and strict. Your boat, located on the dock, violates community guidelines. It is considered unsightly and must be removed within 10 days. Tom read the letter twice, then 3 times. He could not believe what he was reading. His boat? His boat was not just any boat. It was small, old, and a little worn, yes, but it had been with him for years. He had repaired it with his father when he was young. His father had passed away long ago, but every piece of wood on that boat reminded Tom of the time they had spent together. To him, the boat was not ugly or broken, it was a treasure, a memory he kept alive. Max barked softly, as if sensing Tom's confusion. Tom looked down at him and said quietly, "They think it's just a boat, Max. But they don't know." He folded the letter slowly and put it back in the envelope. His hands felt heavy, not with anger, but with sadness. He didn't understand why the HOA cared so much. The boat sat on his own dock, floating quietly, hurting no one. Every evening he would sit inside it, rocking gently on the water, watching the sky change colors as the day ended. It was his place of peace. And now, suddenly, someone wanted to take that away. As he walked back to the house, Tom thought about the rules. He had always respected them. He kept his grass short, painted his fence when needed, and never played music too loud. He believed in harmony with neighbors, not conflict. But this letter felt unfair. He set the envelope on the wooden table inside his home. His eyes drifted to the window, where he could see the outline of the boat resting by the dock. A little chipped paint, yes, but strong and steady, just like the memories it carried. He thought about his father's voice, teaching him how to tie ropes, how to steer, how to trust the water. The boat wasn't just wood and nails. It was a story. Tom decided he would not act right away. He wanted to think, to understand why this letter had been sent. Perhaps it was a mistake. Perhaps someone had complained without really looking. He hoped it was something small. Still, a part of him worried. He had heard stories about the HOA being strict, sometimes even unkind. That evening, Tom took Max and walked down to the dock. The air smelled fresh, carrying the soft scent of pine from the trees nearby. He stepped onto the wooden planks and sat inside the boat. The water rippled gently as if welcoming him home. Max lay at his feet, calm and watchful. Tom let his hand rest on the side of the boat, feeling the rough wood beneath his fingers. "They don't see what I see," Tom whispered. "They only see rules. But I see my father's smile. I see all the summers we spent here. I see every fish we caught, every laugh we shared. How can I let them take this away?" The sun slowly dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across the water. Tom stayed there until the first stars appeared, his heart heavy but steady. The letter sat inside the house, waiting for a response. But Tom knew one thing for sure: this was not going to be as simple as removing an old boat. This was about memory, respect, and something much deeper than community rules. As he finally stood and walked back to the house, Max at his side, Tom whispered again, almost to himself, "This boat belongs here. And I'll find a way to make them understand." The night grew quiet, but inside Tom's heart, a storm was just beginning to rise. The next morning, Tom stood by the window, his eyes fixed on the dock where the old boat rested. The sunlight touched the water, making it sparkle like glass. The boat looked quiet and harmless, yet that single letter had turned it into a problem in the eyes of the homeowners association. Tom could not understand how something so ordinary to him could be such a concern to others. He walked outside, Max following him with cheerful steps. The dog never seemed to carry worries, and Tom often wished he could live with the same light heart. As they reached the dock, Tom sat down on the edge, letting his feet dangle above the water. He stared at the boat, remembering the past. It was not just wood and nails. It was history. He could still see his father's hands guiding him as a young boy, teaching him how to sand the wooden sides until they were smooth. He remembered the smell of fresh paint, the sound of a hammer echoing on summer afternoons, and the way his father's voice always carried calmness. "This boat will carry you through storms," his father had once said with a smile. "Not just on the lake, but in life too." Tom smiled faintly at the memory. He had repaired the boat many times since then. The paint had faded, and the wood carried scratches, but it was strong. Each mark was not a flaw, it was a story. Max barked once, interrupting his thoughts, as if reminding him of the present. Tom reached out and patted the dog's head. "You're right, boy. They don't know its story. To them, it's just an old thing. But to us, it's family." The day passed slowly. Tom tried to do his usual tasks, trimming plants near the porch, sweeping the walkway, and fixing a loose hinge on the gate. But every time he stopped, his eyes wandered back to the boat. The letter kept echoing in his mind: "Violates community guidelines, must be removed." In the afternoon, Tom decided to walk around the neighborhood. Maybe he could understand better. The homes were neat, with trimmed grass and painted fences. Some neighbors waved at him politely, though others kept to themselves. He wondered if one of them had complained. Did they really find his boat ugly? Or was it simply the HOA president being too strict? As he walked back, he noticed how peaceful the lake looked from different angles. Children were playing near the water, laughing as they skipped stones. A couple sat on a bench, pointing at the ducks floating by. Everyone enjoyed the lake, yet none of them knew the truth hidden in Tom's old papers: that the lake itself belonged to his family. That secret gave Tom a strange strength. He had not shared it with anyone because he never felt the need to. For years, he had allowed the community to use the water freely. His father had taught him that nature was meant to be shared. But now, with this letter in his hand, Tom felt a shift inside him. Evening came, and Tom decided to take the boat out onto the water. He untied the ropes and gently pushed it away from the dock. Max sat at the edge, watching but not jumping in. The boat rocked gently as Tom picked up the oar and began to row. The water responded kindly, parting smoothly with each stroke. Out in the middle of the lake, Tom paused. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple. He let the boat drift, his eyes on the horizon. Out here, away from the rules and the letters, everything felt right. The boat belonged here, just as much as the trees, the birds, and the water. Tom thought about the meeting he would have to attend. The HOA would expect him to explain or agree to remove the boat. But what could he say to people who only saw rules and appearances? How could he make them understand that some things could not be judged by looks alone? As the stars began to appear, Tom rowed back slowly. The reflection of the moon touched the ripples of the lake, making them shine like silver. Max wagged his tail as Tom returned to the dock. Tom tied the boat carefully, his hands steady. "Don't worry," he whispered to the boat, as though it could hear him. "I won't let them take you away. You've been with me through everything. You belong here." He walked back to the house, feeling both heavy and hopeful. The letter was still on the table, but now Tom looked at it differently. It was not just a demand. It was the start of a test. A test of patience, of memory, and of strength. That night, Tom sat on his porch with Max lying at his feet. The air was cool, filled with the sounds of crickets and gentle waves. Tom closed his eyes for a moment and thought about what was coming. He didn't have all the answers yet, but deep inside, he knew one thing: this was no longer just about a boat. It was about protecting the life and the lake his father had left behind. The day of the HOA meeting arrived, and Tom felt a heavy weight in his chest. He was not a man who liked arguments. He preferred quiet evenings, gentle talks, and peace by the water. But the letter had left him no choice. If he stayed silent, they might try to remove the boat without asking again. Tom dressed simply, wearing his old blue shirt and clean trousers. He didn't care much about clothes, but he wanted to look respectful. Before leaving, he patted Max on the head. The dog tilted his head, as if asking to come along, but pets weren't allowed at meetings. "Stay here, boy," Tom said softly. "I'll be back soon." The community center was only a short walk away. As Tom entered, he saw rows of folding chairs filled with neighbors. Some greeted him kindly, others avoided his eyes. At the front sat the HOA board, with Mr. Reed in the middle. He was a tall man with gray hair and sharp glasses. His expression was serious, almost too serious for a meeting about rules and boats. The meeting began with small matters: lawn care, parking spaces, and holiday decorations. Tom listened quietly, waiting for his turn. He noticed how some neighbors argued about small details, while others stayed silent, nodding at whatever the board decided. Finally, Mr. Reed cleared his throat. "Next, we must address the matter of Mr. Tom's boat. It has been reported as unsightly and in violation of our community guidelines." All eyes turned to Tom. His heart beat faster, but he stood up calmly. "With respect, sir," he began, his voice steady though soft, "that boat sits on my own dock. It doesn't block anyone, and it doesn't harm anyone. I've taken care of it for years. It is part of my home." Mr. Reed adjusted his glasses. "Rules are rules, Mr. Tom. The guidelines clearly state that neglected or worn boats are not to be kept visible. The appearance of our community must remain consistent." Tom took a deep breath. "I understand rules. I follow them. I keep my yard clean, my fence painted, my lights low. But this boat is different. It may look old to you, but it holds memories of my father. It is strong, safe, and well cared for. Please, I ask you to see it not just as wood, but as part of my life." A quiet murmur spread across the room. Some neighbors whispered to each other. One older woman in the back nodded as if she understood. But Mr. Reed's face remained firm. "Mr. Tom," he said, "emotions cannot override regulations. If we allow one exception, we must allow them all. If you don't comply, we will take further action." The words stung. Tom felt a mix of sadness and frustration. He wanted to shout, but he held back. He had never believed in anger. Instead, he stood straighter, meeting Mr. Reed's sharp gaze. "I hear you," Tom said slowly. "But I cannot promise to remove the boat. It is not a piece of trash. It is part of who I am. If that means we must talk more about this, then so be it." The room grew silent again. Some neighbors looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. Others avoided looking at him at all. Finally, Mr. Reed sighed. "Very well. We will revisit this matter at the next session. But I warn you, Mr. Tom, We expect compliance. Tom sat back down, his hands steady on his knees. Inside, though, his heart was heavy. He had spoken his truth, but it felt like it had fallen on closed ears. When the meeting ended, a few neighbors approached him quietly. One man said, "I understand your point, Tom. My father had an old car I could never let go of. Maybe you should explain more at the next meeting." Another whispered, "Don't worry. Some of us don't mind your boat at all." Those words gave Tom a little comfort, though the weight of Mr. Reed's warning still lingered. As he walked home under the soft glow of streetlights, Tom thought deeply. He had tried to explain with kindness, but rules had no heart. Maybe words alone would not be enough. Maybe he would need to show them something greater. Max barked happily as Tom returned, wagging his tail as if nothing in the world was wrong. Tom bent down and hugged him tightly. "It didn't go well, boy," he whispered, "but we're not done yet." That night, as Tom sat by the window looking out at the lake, he felt a memory stir. He remembered the folder his father had once given him, filled with old documents. He had never looked at it closely, thinking it was just papers about land. But now, he wondered. The boat was important, yes, but maybe there was more to the story of this lake than he had realized. With that thought, Tom stood and walked to the small cabinet in the corner of the room. He pulled out the folder, dust settling on his fingers. Slowly, he opened it, not yet knowing how much his life and the HOA's rules were about to change. The folder lay on Tom's wooden table, thick with papers that smelled faintly of age. Dust rose as he turned the cover, and for a moment he felt like a boy again, sitting beside his father, listening to stories of land, family, and the lake. Max rested nearby, watching him with curious eyes, as though he too sensed the importance of what was about to be discovered. Tom gently pulled out the first set of documents. The paper was yellow, the ink faded but still clear. At the top, it read, "Property Deed." His father's name was printed neatly, followed by words Tom had never fully noticed before. He read aloud softly, "Ownership includes the surrounding lake and all connected rights." Tom blinked. His father had never spoken much about legal matters, but he remembered his calm voice saying, "This lake is ours to protect, not to own." At the time, Tom thought his father only meant it as a lesson about care and respect for nature. But now, looking at the paper, he realized the meaning had been far deeper. He flipped through more documents. Maps drawn in black lines showed the outline of the lake, and right at the center was a mark with his father's signature. The property extended not just to his house and dock, but to the entire body of water that all the neighbors enjoyed. Tom leaned back in his chair, stunned. He whispered, "All this time, it was ours." Max gave a soft bark, as if answering. Tom continued reading, discovering letters from many years ago. Some were from surveyors confirming the borders, others from town offices that had recorded the purchase. His father had clearly taken care of everything. Yet he had never boasted, never claimed authority. Instead, he had let everyone use the lake freely, believing that water should bring people together. Tom's eyes grew moist. "You never told me everything, did you, Dad? You wanted me to figure it out when the time came." That night, Tom hardly slept. His thoughts turned in circles. The HOA had written to him as though they had power over the lake, yet here lay proof that the lake was his family's responsibility. It was not about control, but about truth. They wanted to judge his boat, yet they did not even know who truly held the right to the water beneath it. By morning, Tom felt both heavy and strong. He walked outside with the folder under his arm. The air was crisp, and the lake shimmered in the sunlight. He looked at the boat resting peacefully by the dock. Suddenly, it didn't seem small or weak anymore. It looked like a symbol, a reminder of his father's gift and his own duty. Throughout the day, Tom thought about what to do next. Should he keep this knowledge private, as his father had? Or should he reveal it to the HOA, to stop them from pressing him further? He knew his father's way was quiet generosity. But times had changed. The board wasn't simply asking him to share, they were demanding he erase a piece of his past. Tom made a decision. He would not fight with anger, but he would not stay silent either. The next meeting, he would bring the folder. He would show them the truth. Not to embarrass them, but to help them understand. That evening, Tom sat by the dock again, watching the sky turn orange and pink. He opened the folder one more time, carefully organizing the papers in order. The deed, the maps, the letters all ready to be shown. Max lay at his feet, resting his head on his paws, while the boat rocked gently with the rhythm of the water. As the sun dipped lower, Tom spoke softly, almost as if speaking to his father's memory. "I will do it right, Dad. I won't use these papers for pride or power. But I can't let them treat your boat like a mistake. It belongs here, just like we do. I'll make sure they understand." The night grew darker, stars filling the sky, yet Tom felt a light inside him. For the first time since receiving the letter, he did not feel uncertain. He had a path. Tomorrow, the lake would still sparkle, the neighbors would still walk by, and the board would still believe their rules were stronger than memories. But Tom knew something they did not: the lake itself carried his family's story. And soon, they would know too. The folder sat on Tom's table like a quiet promise. For days, he had read and reread the papers inside, memorizing every word and every map. The truth was clear now: his father had not only given him a home by the lake but also the responsibility of the lake itself. That knowledge filled Tom with both pride and weight. The HOA's demand about his boat no longer felt like a small problem. It had become something larger, a test of respect, memory, and truth. Still, Tom was not the kind of man who liked conflict. He didn't want to walk into a room and make his neighbors feel small. But he also couldn't stand by and let his father's legacy be dismissed as unsightly. That morning, Tom sat on his porch with Max stretched out at his feet. The lake glittered in the sunlight, calm and wide, as though waiting for his choice. He sipped his tea slowly, thinking through the words he would say. "Max," he said, scratching the dog's ear, "I don't want to shame them. I don't want to make anyone angry. But I need them to understand. This boat is not just mine. It's part of something bigger. They think rules give them power, but the truth runs deeper than paper rules. It runs as deep as this water." Max wagged his tail, and Tom smiled faintly. The day went on as usual, trimming plants, fixing a loose board on the dock, feeding Max, yet every small task carried the same thought: how will I explain this? He imagined standing before the board, imagined their faces when they saw the deed and the maps. Some might be shocked, others embarrassed. Perhaps Mr. Reed, the strict president, would argue. But Tom knew the papers were stronger than opinions. That evening, Tom took the boat out once more. The oars dipped quietly into the water, the ripples spreading like whispers. He rowed until he reached the middle of the lake, where the view stretched in every direction. Here, surrounded by the calm water, Tom felt his father's presence more strongly than ever. He remembered one summer afternoon years ago. His father had placed the oar in his hands and said, "You don't fight the water, Tom. You move with it. The lake always shows you the way, if you're patient." Tom closed his eyes, letting the boat drift. "I hear you, Dad," he whispered. "I won't fight with anger. I'll move with patience. But I will not give up." By the time he rowed back, the decision was made. At the next meeting, he would bring the folder. He would stand before the board and the neighbors, not with pride but with calm truth. He would show them the papers, explain the history, and let them see that the boat was not a violation, it was part of the lake's story, part of the very water they all enjoyed. The next few days passed slowly. Tom prepared himself in small ways. He ironed his shirt, something he rarely did. He gathered the documents neatly into a clean envelope. He even practiced speaking aloud, standing in his living room with Max as his only audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said one evening, holding the papers in his hand, "I've respected the rules of this community, but there's something more important you need to know," Max barked once, tail wagging, as though approving his speech. Tom chuckled. "You're a good listener, boy. Maybe I should take you with me." When the morning of the meeting finally arrived, Tom felt steady. He was nervous, yes, but not weak. He tucked the envelope under his arm and walked down the familiar road to the community hall. The sun was high, and the air was fresh. He noticed neighbors mowing lawns, children playing, and couples walking by the water. None of them knew the truth that rested quietly in his hands. As he walked, Tom thought of what might happen. Maybe the board would apologize. Maybe they would argue. Maybe the neighbors would see him differently after today. But none of that mattered as much as keeping his father's promise. The boat, the dock, the lake, all of it was part of something he had been entrusted to protect. He paused once more before entering the building, looking back toward the water in the distance. The lake sparkled in the sun, calm and endless, as if giving him strength. "Don't worry," he whispered. "I'll speak for us both, you and Dad." Then, with quiet resolve, Tom stepped inside. The envelope in his hand felt heavier than ever, but also powerful. Tonight, he would no longer be silent. Tonight, the board and the neighbors would finally learn the truth about the lake, the boat, and the story that had been waiting for years to be told. The community hall was filled with the usual chatter when Tom walked in. Neighbors sat on folding chairs, some talking in low voices, others flipping through the printed agenda. At the front of the room, the HOA board sat behind a long table. Mr. Reed, the president, adjusted his glasses and gave Tom a brief, sharp glance. Tom carried the envelope with the documents tucked under his arm. He walked quietly to an empty seat near the middle of the room. A few neighbors nodded at him politely, while others avoided his eyes. He could feel the weight of the boat issue hanging in the air even before the meeting began. The session started with routine matters again: garden inspections, parking complaints, and reminders about holiday decorations. Tom listened patiently, his mind steady, waiting for the moment he knew would come. His hand rested on the envelope, feeling its weight as though his father's voice was hidden inside. Finally, Mr. Reed cleared his throat. "Now, we must return to the matter of Mr. Tom's boat," he said firmly. "As we discussed in the last meeting, the boat does not meet community standards. It must be removed or we will move forward with formal action." The room grew quieter. Some neighbors leaned forward, curious to hear what Tom would say. Tom stood slowly, his back straight, his eyes calm. He held the envelope firmly and walked to the front. His steps echoed on the wooden floor, and for a moment, all eyes were on him. He placed the envelope gently on the table before the board. "With respect," Tom began, his voice clear but steady, "I've listened to your rules. I've followed them for years. But tonight, I need you all to listen to something you do not know." Mr. Reed raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Tom opened the envelope and pulled out the deed, the maps, and the letters. He spread them out on the table, turning the pages so the board and the neighbors could see. "These are the original property papers," Tom explained. "They belonged to my father before me. They show something important, something none of you have been told." He pointed to the map, his finger tracing the outline of the lake. "This lake, the very water we all enjoy, belongs to my family. My father purchased it decades ago, and the rights have been passed down to me. Every page here proves it." A wave of murmurs spread across the room. Neighbors leaned forward, eyes wide with surprise. Some whispered to each other, others stared at the papers in disbelief. Tom continued, his tone soft but steady. For years, my father believed the lake should be shared. He let everyone enjoy it freely, without ever claiming control. I have done the same. But when I received a letter telling me my boat was a violation, I knew it was time to speak. This boat is not just an object. It carries my father's memory. It belongs here, just as much as the water it rests on. The room grew silent again. Mr. Reed looked down at the papers, his face tightening. "Are you saying," he asked slowly, "that the entire lake is your property?" "Yes," Tom answered calmly. "Every drop of water, every wave that touches your docks. It does not mean I will take it away from anyone. It means that before you call my boat a violation, you must understand whose lake it rests on." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, from the back of the room, a voice broke the silence. "I had no idea," said the older woman who had nodded at him in the last meeting. "Tom, your father was a kind man. I remember him. If this boat is part of his memory, then it belongs on the lake." Others began to murmur in agreement. A man stood and said, "If the lake is yours, Tom, then we've all been borrowing it without knowing. We should be grateful, not demanding." Mr. Reed shifted in his chair. His authority seemed to shrink in front of the documents and the voices rising around him. He cleared his throat again, but his words came softer this time. We did not know this history. The board was acting under the guidelines we had. Perhaps we were too quick." Tom looked around the room, his eyes gentle. "I do not want to take anything away from anyone. I only want respect for my father's memory, for this boat, and for the lake that has carried all of us. That's all." Silence lingered for a moment, then someone began to clap. Slowly, others joined. The sound filled the hall, not loud or wild, but warm and steady. Tom felt his chest grow lighter, the weight of the letter that had once cut into him now lifting away. Max wasn't there, but Tom could almost hear his happy bark in his mind. For the first time in weeks, Tom smiled fully. The meeting ended soon after, but the air in the hall was different now. The boat was no longer a violation. It had become a symbol, a bridge between the past and the present, between one man's memory and an entire community's respect. And Tom, holding the papers close, knew that his father's legacy was safe. The night after the meeting, Tom sat on his porch with Max by his side. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, quiet and peaceful, as though it too understood the truth that had been spoken. For the first time in weeks, Tom felt a calmness in his chest. He had carried his father's secret for so long, unsure if he should ever reveal it. Now, the community knew, and instead of anger, they had shown respect. The following days brought small but meaningful changes. Neighbors who had once avoided his eyes now greeted him warmly. Some stopped by his house, not to complain, but to thank him. One man said, "Tom, I've lived here for 10 years and never knew the lake had such a story. Your father must have been a generous man to let everyone enjoy it." Another woman added, "Your boat is part of this place. We see it differently now." Each kind word touched Tom deeply. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, but he was glad the focus was on his father's legacy rather than himself. Even Mr. Reed, the strict president, came by one afternoon. He stood awkwardly by the fence, clearing his throat before speaking. "Tom, I want to apologize. We acted without knowing the full truth. I hope we can move forward without hard feelings." Tom studied him for a moment, then nodded gently. "No hard feelings, Mr. Reed. Rules are important, but sometimes stories are just as important. I only wanted you to hear mine." The man gave a stiff smile, then walked away. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Days turned into weeks, and soon the lake carried a new sense of life. Families came more often, children played along the shore, and neighbors greeted each other with warmer hearts. And always, Tom's boat remained at the dock, no longer called unsightly, but instead spoken of with quiet respect. Sometimes, people even asked Tom to take them out on the water. At first, he hesitated. The boat had always been a private place, filled with his father's memory. But then he remembered his father's lesson: the lake is meant to be shared. So he agreed, and slowly the boat became more than just his. One sunny afternoon, Tom rowed with two children sitting excitedly at the front. Their laughter echoed across the water, and their parents waved from the dock. Tom smiled as he guided the boat gently across the ripples. He felt his father's presence in every stroke of the oars, as if the old man were still teaching him, still guiding him. When the boat returned to the dock, one of the children exclaimed, "That was amazing. This is the best boat ever." Tom chuckled, his heart lighter than it had been in years. "It's a special boat," he said softly. Word spread, and soon, neighbors began to see the boat not as a problem, but as part of the lake's heart. Some even suggested naming the small dock area after Tom's father, as a way to honor his quiet generosity. The idea touched Tom deeply. He didn't need a nameplate or a sign, but the thought of others remembering his father made him smile. One evening, as the sun painted the sky with orange and pink, Tom sat on the boat alone with Max at his feet. The water reflected the colors of the sky, calm and endless. Tom thought about everything that had happened: the letter, the meetings, the heavy secret, and the truth that had finally been shared. He whispered, "We did it, Dad. They understand now." Max lifted his head and barked once, as if agreeing. Tom realized something important in that quiet moment. The lake didn't just belong to him or his father. It belonged to everyone who respected it, everyone who found peace and joy in its waters. His father had understood that all along. Now, Tom carried the same lesson forward. From then on, whenever Tom saw families by the lake, couples walking hand in hand, or children skipping stones, he felt proud. Not because they were enjoying his lake, but because they were honoring the spirit his father had left behind. The boat stayed where it belonged, rocking gently on the water, no longer threatened by rules or letters. It had become a symbol not of conflict, but of unity. It told a story of a man and his father, of memory and patience, of truth revealed at the right time. As the seasons changed, the lake continued to shine, carrying the laughter of neighbors and the quiet strength of one man's decision to stand firm with kindness. And every evening, Tom returned to the dock with Max at his side. He would sit in the boat, watch the sunset, and feel the calm water beneath him. The world was not perfect, but here, on the lake, everything felt right.